she grew quiet. She seemed to like the funny little songs Bimpong kept singing to soothe her while he snip-snipped and combed out and trimmed away. "There you are," Bimpong said at last, stepping back to admire his work. "It's all over. Fabia, bring your mirror for our little girl to see herself looking prettier than any nymph of the forest." It was then the child spoke for the first time. "Give me back my hair!" she screamed. She leapt off the stool, dashed to the center of the courtyard, and stood there in the blazing sunlight, screaming, "Give me back my hair! Every single curl where it was before! Every root you have pulled, rooted where it was before!" Bimpong, Fabia, and their sons and daughters stood speechless with horror. The little girl Bimpong had brought right inside their courtyard was a Samantha child, a wood nymph, a creature of strange magical powers. The little girl continued to shriek. "Come, Samantha folk, come one and all! Out of teak, Wawa, Sese and mighty Odum tree! This way, this way!" The whole village heard her piercing cries. All the people rushed helter-skelter to Bimpong's house, where the little Samantha child screamed, "Bimpong shall not rest! His people shall not rest until he gives me back my hair!"
Bimpong shall not rest, his people shall not rest until he gives me back my hair.
Soon the frightening news rippled through the crowd. "It's a Samantha child who is sitting there." The crowd stood frozen, just as horrified as Bimpong, his wife, his sons, and his daughters. Everyone knew the tales told in the village about the beautiful but mischievous Samantha folk of the forest. Tales about their beauty, their pretty ways, and their terrible anger. Suddenly, strange sounds filled the village. The people could hear a crackling and snapping in the forest, as though the trees were being cut down. They could hear round after round of soft, tinkling laughter. Getting nearer and nearer, they could hear a host of footsteps coming closer and closer. And yet, all anybody could see was the little Samantha child sitting in the center of Bimpong's courtyard. "Whatever are we going to do? Whatever are we going to do, my people?" the chief cried out. "Give me back my hair!" the little Samantha child hissed fiercely at him. The chief and elders scurried out of the courtyard. The crowd followed, fleeing to the marketplace to huddle together. But the strange noises filled the whole village. Nobody was to have any rest that evening, nor the next day, not the next. Each day, just when the sunrise flushed the sky, the little Samantha child rushed out of Bimpong's house screaming, "Give me back my hair!" At once, the strange sounds would begin all over again. It was not long until almost before people's very eyes, all the food vanished from the village. Cooking pots were empty. Maize and yam barns were bare. Kitchen gardens were clean plucked. In pens and coops, only the scent of sheep, goats, and chickens remained. From Saturday to Thursday, nobody dared leave the village to cross the log bridge over the stream and walk along the path through the forest to the farmlands. Every day, from sunrise to sunset, the little Samantha child screamed and the strange sounds rustled through the village. Bimpong had no rest at all. Every day he heard, "Bimpong, you went to the forest on a Friday. Bimpong, you brought a Samantha child home. Bimpong, you had to be the clever hair cutter." Chief and elders had no rest either. The villagers pestered them every day. "Find a way to save your people," they begged. But the chief and elders could find no way. Nobody had any rest. Everybody grew hungrier. By Thursday, the crowd huddling together in the marketplace looked sickly and feeble. Then Friday came again. The screaming began even earlier than before. The strange noises were even scarier than before. Then, quite suddenly, the strange sounds ceased. The silence, coming so much sooner than ever before, scared the people even more. As they stood looking helplessly at one another, they saw Afrum the fool returning to the village. The little Samantha child began to back away. Then she stopped alertly still as Afrum came striding up the marketplace. "In the name of the good goddess of earth," Afrum exclaimed, "why have you become so wretched, my people?" Feebly, they told him what was happening in the village. All the while, Afrum and the little Samantha child stared at each other as they had before in Bimpong's courtyard. "I see," said he, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Well, this child and I must have a little meeting, mustn't we? I think we shall understand each other well enough." "Oh, yes, I think we shall in the end, for the leaves have whispered to the fool. The birds have ceased their changing to chatter strange things to the fool." Afrum looked at the little Samantha child. "Happy sunrise, my friend," he boomed, smiling. Her eyes blazed wildly at him. "No answer, my friend? These people cut your hair, and you want it back where it grew, I'm told." "I do!" she screamed fiercely. Every single curl where it was before. Every hair root pulled, rooted where it was before. Some things are not so easily done, my little friend, said Afroom, laughing. Huh, but compared with some other things, giving back your hair is easy. And in his sing-song way, he continued.
Before this sun above has rolled itself away, your wishes shall be done, and back you shall be with your folk again tonight at moonlight,
Hello?
smiling at your pretty face in the waters of ponds.
So saying,
Hello?
Afroom seized the little
Hello?
Samantha child's hand and gripped it firmly. He looked as though he were ready to walk to the end of the world with her. Follow me, he commanded the crowd. Nobody questioned Afroom then, or called him the fool. The people obeyed his...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph Jemfi, and I'm going to be the MC of this event. On behalf of Afram Publications, I would like to welcome each and every one to this August event. 50 years of producing quality books and then promoting literacy in Ghana is no mean achievement. And we should be happy that we have an indigenous company that has been able to live up to this time. And it's a happy moment for us to be here to celebrate Afram. Let's put our hands together for ourselves for making it. And I promise it's going to be a very short but very, very purposeful event. So without boring you with much talk, I would invite the hosts of the Ghana International Book Fair, who happens to be the president of the Ghana Publishers Association, to give us a welcome address. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Asari Kunadiyama.
Good afternoon. I would like to especially welcome our distinguished guests and the panelists who are very respected and revered personalities within the creative sector. And to all of you coming from all walks of life who are with us to witness this day. You are most welcome. Nana, not even sitting down, you are welcome. Prof, Doc. Let me say that I am very, very honored to be standing here to address such an august audience, particularly with the panelists who I have great respect for. And I am happy that today I am going to be part of history. No matter how you measure my delivery, history will not forget me, and I'm most grateful. I would like to make a few comments, respectfully, with the 50 years of indigenous publishing in Ghana, having also been in the publishing industry for some time, and also coming from a family
in progress
that also had been in publishing for 53 years. It is quite insightful for us to be able to stand or sit here today to discuss this indigenous publishing that has given us the opportunity to witness the variety of books that we have, interestingly, from Ghanaian publishers and writers. I want to emphasize, I've found some love with Dr. Mojabin Dowuna. I was reading and chanced upon his speech, or a message that he delivered at a meeting of experts on book development in Africa, organized under the auspices of UNESCO and held at Accra, Ghana from the 13th to 19th of February 1968. And I would like to make some comments on, or more or less quote him and then move this. Dr. Douna had emphasized the need for African governments to make books and reading the cornerstone of education and social progress. And he emphasized again that we cannot endure without the stimulus that comes from reading. Despite the vast natural resources of Africa, he said, Africa can progress and develop only with knowledge, the knowledge that can be gained through books. I want to make some alignment with Dr. Douna's issue or statement, which he had said at the time, to me, had elevated the political and developmental discourse at the time. That's making books and reading a central point of political administration and national development. In fact, a few years before this conference in 1965, the government of Ghana had established the State Publishing Corporation with a printing department that we all refer to as Tema Press. And by then, at the time, it was the largest in sub-Saharan Africa. However, there were few books produced in Ghana. And by that time, the Bureau of Ghana Languages has always been set up also to develop local language publications. But there was some vacuum by way of encouraging Ghanaian writers and business or entrepreneurs to take up the book industry role. There was therefore the need to establish publishing houses, and I'm also very, very sure that the Ghana International Book Fair, the first ever that was to happen, it was in 1969 at the forecourt of the Ghana Library Board, now Ghana Library Authority. I want to believe, respectfully, that the organizers had gotten inspiration from Dr. Udoune's speech and had decided to fill the vacuum that was awaiting them. So, the first National Book Fair organized in south of the Sahara, Africa, south of the Sahara, was organized interestingly by the following. They were consisted the board of the first Ghana International Book Fair. Mr. Samuel Asare-Kunedu, chairman. Mr. J.T. Ofori, vice chairman and director, Ghana Library Board. Ms. Efua Sutherland, member. Then he was Dr. J.H. Kwablanketia, member. The book fair was qualified by all as a success by all standards, with over 165 foreign participants from across the globe. Many young Ghanaian entrepreneurs, as I've ended, took advantage of this fair and signed licenses for rights to either distribute the books or publish local editions. Mr. Samuel Asare-Kunedu went on to establish a publishing company called Anowu Educational Publications in 1970. Mrs. Efua Sutherland and Dr. Ketkia established Afram Publications Limited in 1973. It is therefore worthy of celebration of how far our indigenous publishing has come, not forgetting the contributions of the trailblazers. Today, Afram Limited, Publications Limited, the company Efua established, is still in business, despite the strong lobby and coercive tactics of overseas publishing corporations. It has weathered the storm and still have some meaningful roles to play in the book industry of Ghana. The late Efua Sutherland was a great writer by all standards. When you read her works and watch performances of her plays, you are convinced that she was meticulous in her work. Her interventions in editing of creative works were another excellent gift that were left lasting memories in the minds of beneficiaries. And here again, I want to refer to my father, Samuel Asare-Kunedu. He was one of the beneficiaries. In fact, he said in his book, A Woman in Her Prime, which also was published in the African Writers Series, was edited by Efua, and he had always remembered how she would transform the manuscript into a world-class novel. No fees were paid. In fact, he said, if refused any monetary consideration. To her, his success would be her joy. Such were the lasting memories that my father carried away to his grave by asking his executors to personally extend his gratitude to Auntie Efua. And at this point, I want to quote Charles Kingsley, a famous British writer. He says, not self-interest, but self-sacrifice is the only law upon which society can be grounded with any hope of prosperity and performance. Magru Sampson, another writer, a Ghanaian writer in 1931, also said this. He says, it is common knowledge that when the career of great men remains as lasting monument or an enduring example of human energy, it remains an inspiration to rising generations, contributing to forming their character. They are lights set upon a hill, illuminating the moral atmosphere around them. Up until now, maybe the panelists will discuss, and maybe today we're going to start writing the history of publishing in Ghana. I'm yet to get any literature on the history of indigenous publishing in Ghana. That I stand to be corrected. That highlights the contribution of Efua and the team. But among the statesmen of Ghana, whose figures will continue to loom large through the dusk of departed years, Efua Theodora Sutherland's life will be of prime importance and will continue to occupy a leading place in the history of the book industry of Ghana. This anniversary symposium, therefore, must have the objective of eliciting more information on how much contributions Ghanaians have made in instituting an important industry as the Ghana publishing industry. We must use this symposium to document the history of indigenous publishing and how it has transformed with areas that have added quality, efficiency, and style to the industry. So, in welcoming the panelists, Prof, and your team, I believe that by the time we finish this symposium, the outcome would engineer a transformation that in the next 10 years, when we meet again to discuss this industry, we will be telling a different story of progress and prominence. Members, you are welcome to today's symposium, and we believe that the stage is now set for us to listen to our panelists. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yamwa, the chairman of the Ghana International Book Fair Planning Committee and the president of the Ghana Publishers Association. Yes, right about now we'll move to the next item on our program. And now that we've been welcomed, we have to know the purpose of this gathering. Before I go on to introduce the special person to do that, I would want to maybe inform you of the theme of this symposium. So the theme, as I see here, is 50 years of indigenous publishing in Ghana, the Efua Sutherland legacy. So basically, this is what we have all gathered to discuss and deliberate on. And we have no mean person than Miss Amowi Sutherland Phillips, the daughter of Efua Sutherland, who is joining us online to give us the purpose of gathering. So if we are ready to take the feed, technicians, you can give me a signal, then we go ahead to listen to the purpose of gathering. Before that, I can see a lot of top people in the creative space. And as the program goes on, we'll introduce everybody I see. Thank you. I think we have two options. We can take her live or we can play the backup video. So let's wait a while and see if the live works, because that will be more fun. Hi, Miss Phillips, can you hear us? We can hear you, but if you can hear us, you can send in a text to confirm that maybe we are audible so that we know the fault is either at our end or yours.
From Publications' 50 Years of Indigenous Publishing in Ghana. I joined the staff of Afram Publications as a very junior temporary employee at the reception desk soon after the company was established, and I later returned as a lawyer to serve as the board secretary for a few years. What this experience did for me was that it allowed me the privilege of observing the launch and maturation of a pioneering venture in Ghana's literary ecosystem, steered by its distinguished original conveners, including Professor J.H. Kwabena Nketia, Mr. J.S. Addo, Mr. Anthony Kobner-Wood, Mr. Willis Bell, and of course, my mother, Mrs. Efua Sutherland, who was the brain and inspiration behind the venture. By the 1970s, Efua Sutherland was already a veteran of post-independence institution building for cultural production as a writer, educator, and literary mentor to many, some of whom may be here with us at this event. It was probably inevitable that after playing a key role in establishing the Ghana Society of Writers, the Ghana Theatre Movement, and the Drama Studio, that she would identify the potential and indeed necessity for local book publication and turn her boundless energies to doing something about it. I also came to understand from my association with Afram that the indigenous independent publishing business in Ghana and elsewhere in Africa was and is no easy task, for reasons which I'm sure our distinguished panel today will touch on. Nevertheless, Afram can lay claim to impressive achievements and firsts. In the depth and range of its book list, its activism in encouraging writing and book illustration, its support of literacy in general and literacy for children in particular, and its pioneering role in producing the first 2 audiobooks for children in the country, Tihinta and Voice in the Forest, which I'm proud to say that I helped to design and produce. That Afram not only blazed a trail for others to follow, but has survived for 5 turbulent economic decades is a testament to all the board members, management, and staff over the years who had its best interest at heart. I particularly want to acknowledge my sister, Efua Sutherland Addy's role in stewarding our mother's legacy at Afram and in other ways too many to mention here. We note with respect and delight that independent and indigenous publishing that originates in or reflects Africa is flourishing today, enabled or amplified by new technologies through many avenues and modes. My hope is that we will continue to acknowledge the shoulders on which we stand as we progress towards a brighter, homegrown, and diaspora-fueled literary future, engaging readers, listeners, and participants of all ages on or off the continent and beyond. Once again, you are warmly welcomed.
Very much. Can we put hands together for Mrs. Phillips once again? Yes, so as I promised, there are a few people who would have to introduce before we even introduce the chairperson of this event. Okay, I'll skip that and then we take, because we have to ask our chairperson for today's occasion to accept to even chair the event before we go ahead with other things. So without much ado, I would invite Reverend Priscilla Nananketia to do the introduction for us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to introduce the chairperson for this very special symposium, Professor Efua Sutherland Addy, someone I've known since childhood, because there's a connection with our parents and our families. Efua Sutherland Addy is a retired associate professor of African Studies at the University of Ghana and adjunct professor at NYU Accra. She has taught at a number of universities, Manchester, Birmingham, Bloomington, amongst others. Her main research interests are written and oral literature, women's literature, educational and cultural policy. Her current research project, entitled Oral Traditions and Expressive Diversity, involves the collection and I always struggle with this word, oh my goodness, digitization of Ghanaian oral traditions. Her publications include edited volumes, perspectives on mythology, women writing Africa, West African, and the Sahel, edited with Aminata Dow. Her article, Infancy Meets English, Interpretation of Ama Tedu's Multilingual Idiom, is published in A. Adams' Essays in honor of Ama Tedu at 70. Professor Sutherland Addy was Deputy Minister for Tourism and Culture, 1986, and Higher Education, 1986 to 1993, in the Republic of Ghana. She has served on several national and international boards, including the Ghana Commercial Bank, the Open Society for West Africa, the Commonwealth of Learning, and the Board of Trustees of the Voluntary Fund for Technical Cooperation of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights. Sutherland Addy's civil society activities lies in the areas of higher education, girls' education, children, Pan-Africanism, culture, and public space. She is currently the chairperson of the Forum of African Women Educationalists, Ghana, Afram Publications, Ghana Limited, and the Panafest Foundation. She's also a member of the board of Mofra Foundation. She's had many awards. It includes the Honorary Fellow, College of Presbyters, UK, Honorary Doctor of Letters, Winneba, Excellence in Distance Learning, Commonwealth of Learning and Tourism Icon, Ghana Tourist Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a brief bio. She has achieved much. And not only because she's the daughter of Efua Sutherland, but I think that she qualifies to chair this symposium. So ladies and gentlemen, our chairperson, Professor Efua Sutherland Addy. I want to believe you have consented to chairing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I've just been told she's the daughter of Professor Nketia. So it looks like in this room we have children of stalwarts taking over from where their parents left over. So that's good to know. Now that our chairperson has accepted the role to chair this August event, I would look through and then maybe, give a hi to a few people I can pick up. Yes, I see Nana Owayeni Otue Champong, the Executive Director of the National Commission on Culture, and a few of his entourage in the room. I can see Mr. Akunu Dake. He needs no introduction when we are talking about culture in Ghana. Yes. I also see the head of department of the Publishing Studies Department, KNUST, Dr. Ralph Nyaduado. Yes. Yes, and yes. And then I see Ms. Aike Apia, who is also a lecturer at the department. Yeah. I see the director of NNF Esquire, Mr. Sigbao, who is also around. Yeah. And I see a lot of people. As we go on, I'll introduce all the others. All right, so now we'll pause for a performance. And we have a group by name Tahinta Performance. Is it performance or where are they around? Yes, so yeah, we shall invite them to give us a treat. Let's put our hands together for them.
Story from the Akan tradition of Ghana. This version was written by Efua Sutherland. In a rhythm play, it is very important to keep to a beat as you read. You may not have read a story that sounds quite like this before, so we will help you. Listen carefully to the rhythm and say, again. Now, clap twice as you say, again. Very good. Remember, sometimes at the end of a passage, you will hear this. Clap 4 times as you say. Don't worry, you'll soon get the hang of it.
Fine.
money live in the forest.
Why don't you
Thank you very much for that wonderful performance. Yes, we have a couple of people I will quickly mention. Before we move on to the other items on the program. So we have Madam Catherine Apia Pinkra, the Director of General Administration at the Ministry of Education. Can we give a round of applause? We also have Madam Justina Jagba, Director of Administration for GES. Can we, yes, acknowledge her? Yes, and we have a lot of publishers around. I can see Mr. Fred Labi. Yes, he was around. We also have CNN Local, one of the prominent authors of Afram publications. So, Madam, you can give us a wave. Yes, when we look at our top table, I think it's very heavy with prominent people. And I would want to mention their names so that we continue with the program. So we have Madam Lucy Afia-Afirikoto. She was my lecturer at the Department of Publishing Studies, and I was a TA as well. So me and her, we have a very, yes. So I'm glad my lecturer is around. And then we have Professor Amina Mama. Madam, welcome. And then we also have Professor Efua Sutherland Adi. Yes, our chairperson. And then we also have Professor Kofi Anyidoho with us. I think at this point it's safe to say the creative industry in Ghana is here. Yes, so now we move on to the next item on our program, and we will take our keynote address. At this point, I'll hand over the mic to our chairperson to introduce the keynote speaker, and then we take her address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to make a few adjustments to the program. And before we do that, I want to say that there are other Sutherlands in the audience. So can I ask them to stand up, please, so that I'm not alone here? Yes. Ralph Sutherland, Elizabeth Sutherland, Dede, Abba Sutherland, Adi. So children and grandchildren are well represented. Thank you very much. Okay, so Professor Kofi Anyidoho is going to have to leave us soon. So I've craved the indulgence of our keynote speaker to allow him to go first. And, it's difficult to know what to say and what to leave out. Professor Anyidoho is not only globally known scholar of African studies, African literature, but he is also a well-known writer, poet. He's done children's books, he's done scholarly work. It's very difficult to know where to stop. So without going any further, I would also just like to say that he is a mentee of Efua Sutherland, and let me leave it at that. So, Prof. Anyidoho, you have the floor.
Music.
Mother Courage, Mother Courage, a tribute to Auntie Efua Sutherland from all her children in the arts. There is a boil in the throat of your children's joy, Mami Efua. There is a raging boil at the center of your children's hope. We were busy carving new praise songs for your next birthday. Oh, we did not know you must choose the peace of death to ease the pain of life. So we cannot sing your joy. But we could have cried at least. We could have stretched our voice to touch your soul in flight. But there is this boil in the throat of your children's hope. Your children of the man-made lake say they are set adrift upon the floods you so often spoke about. Yesterday, our joy was young and green with the sharp freshness of the lemon grove. Today, our sorrow ripens into a burst of sunflowers, and there is no voice to sing your praise. Someone, perhaps, will broadcast our sorrow on Joy Radio. Oh, let them recall how you gathered the best among our dreams, transformed them all into a vision of a new life, with the stage as the medical lab where you diagnosed our nation's diseased condition, the theater where you performed corrective surgery on our anemic self-esteem. Once, there was a ceremony of remembrance at the old drama studio, your original miracle house. Those to whom you gave birth in the arts, we all gathered for a harvest of your dreams. Uncle Bob Cole, in a solo reenactment of an original masterpiece of life as Kweku Ananse's Web. Uncle Kwamina Ampa with Kusuma Gromba in Odasini, and his tragic choice of fleeting joy. And all the studio players, old and young, they came to recall the dreams we lost to those years the infant men took away from us. And in the midst of all sorrows, you stood tall and proud and firm against the force of hostile winds. The poet said it once so well, that you were Mother Courage with a heart the size of love, large enough for your children's tears, for your nation's fears. You were Furua, the young gazelle who tiptoed into our dawn, rearranged the world you found, gave life a new meaning, but disappeared before we could think of saying thanks. Mami Efua, when you go, please tell them. Tell Uncle Jody Graft in Tataamu. Tell them that the National Theatre is ready at last. Oh, but they planted it over the graveyard of your old drama studio. And that we are doing our best to put back on stage the festival drama you all composed at the dawn of our nation's birth. We are doing our very best. But there are technical problems with our grand design. In your grand vision, you created so many parts for giants, but now all the original cast is gone, and we are stuck with a dwarf brigade. They say you said our grief must be brief, that we cannot mourn your loss longer than a day. They also say you said we must be modest with our farewell piece. And so we are doing our very best to honor your solemn wish. We are doing our very best. But really, Auntie Efua, how can we offer an antelope's burial to an elephant? how can we offer an antelope's burial to an elephant? First of all, let me express my gratitude for the opportunity to be a part of this program for many reasons, but especially because I am a multiple beneficiary of Auntie Efua's role as a principal instigator, someone who was there for so many of us, and fortunately for so long, until she couldn't carry on anymore. So I just like to make this a bit personal at one level, but make it clear that the many ways in which I benefited from her generosity, her creativity, her mentorship was not an isolated case. I belong to a whole generation of younger people with dreams of their own, dreams of becoming creators, cultural activists, creative writers, and I will identify at least some members of that group with whom I shared the benefits of knowing Auntie Efua and working with her. My contact with her started very early. I was a student at Accra Teacher Training College when a wonderful program was introduced under the title the Creative Writers Program for students initially in teacher training colleges and later sixth form secondary schools. And she was one of the advisors to this program. Under this program, we as students belong to creative writing clubs in our various schools, usually with one of the teachers as our patron. We organized various activities that helped us to produce the early efforts at creative writing. But the blessing was that those early efforts were part of a national program endorsed by the Ministry of Education, and I'm glad there are people here from the Ministry of Education. And let me make the appeal right up front. Can we bring that program back? Because with the barest minimum of staff, in fact, for a long time, only one teacher seconded to the program. But under the tutelage of the patrons, including Auntie Efua, the young students produced whatever they could. Initial look by their patron, suggestions for revision, you did the rewriting, and the more or less final draft was sent to the patrons, including Auntie Efua. Dr. Jawa Pronti, and a few others. They looked at these scripts, did whatever corrections that needed to be made upfront, recommendations, and the script would come back to you. You do the revisions. At Christmas, there was a workshop at the district level, and those who did relatively well were sponsored to attend those workshops. During Easter, there was a follow-up workshop at the regional level. Those who did better were selected to participate in these workshops. Then during the Lombak, there was the national workshop, which circulated around the country. It was through this, held at various points in the country, that I got to know most of Ghana. One of the workshops took us as far as to Boku. Unfortunately, during what must have been one of the severest Harmattan seasons. It was dry, it was cold, we were there for about almost a week. You were careful not to touch water. You were careful not to laugh, because if you laugh, your lips could crack. But it helped us to know the country better. We had been to Kumasi, we had been to Sunyani, we had been to Ho, we had been to Kofredia, and one or two other places, Takoradi. But most important of all, the patrons persuaded the Ministry of Education to publish selections of the best contributions from the student members of the association. That is what became the Talent for Tomorrow series. So you could imagine what it was for me as a second-year student in a training college, following one of my earliest attempts at creative writing, a year later to find it in a book which was then distributed to all the schools in the country. There could not have been a better takeoff for you as a young, aspiring creative writer. But the point really was that this would not have been possible without the generous intervention of people like Auntie Efua and the other patrons who looked at our works carefully, closely, and returned them with suggestions. They didn't mark them like our English teachers who mark our essays. Gentle but firm suggestions that help you to improve on the work. So you became a published writer at a very early stage, but with a warning that you are not there yet. So beyond the Creative Writers program, I eventually came to the University of Ghana to do my first degree. She had known me through the creative writing, known me by name through the creative writing program. Very early, she sent for me, and that was the beginning of a lifelong personal apprenticeship. It was a time that she was starting a most interesting project, the Children's Drama Development Project, to encourage creative writing for children in Ghana. But she was careful to let all of us know that you don't just wake up one morning and dream and start writing for children. Writing for children takes for granted that you know about the life of children. How much do you know? Yes, you've been a child and you may still be close to children, but how much grounded is that knowledge? So I had the privilege of being recruited as one of her 2 research assistants. It took us into the field work, documenting the cultural life of children and social life of children across the country. I remember we went to the Eastern region, to the Volta region, and one of our colleagues, some here may remember the name Von Salifu, from the north, was empowered, encouraged, and guided to collect detailed information about the life of children from the northern part of the country. I did a bit with the Volta region, and she would go with us personally into the field sometimes. Most importantly, along with the gathering of information on children, she organized a number of writing workshops. It was in one of these writing workshops that instead of just sitting, I was sitting there the first day as a research assistant. He said, Kofi, what are you doing? I said, I'm watching. He said, you are watching. Take pen and paper and write. I said, really? I hadn't written for children before, but that was the beginning. In the end, that led to my writing what was to become my first play for children. Written, of course, by my exposure and training at that point in English. She read through it carefully, did surgery on it, returned it with lots of red marks, but surprisingly praising it in spite of the red marks. But above all, he said, Kofi, you know, as I read this, I couldn't help thinking that it will be better in Ewe. So I want you to write a second version of this play, but in Ewe. The Ewe version of that play, Akpoklo, was initially published earlier by Whaley, and within 2 weeks of its publication, it sold about 30,000 copies because they needed them for what? A play for children needed for what? Adult education, because there were no text. So it was the printer, the publisher had a ready order for all these copies which were distributed. So I have that as a bilingual text for children in Ewe and in English. That's how come I could later venture to write another play for children she introduced me and others to the idea of what? In drama, test productions. You don't rush your manuscript to a publisher if it has not been tested on the stage. And that test production, she insisted, must not just be in Accra, perhaps at the university campus. You must take it to what? The rural areas, as it did with her own plays. So, again, another enriching experience in the area of writing for children and eventually publishing for children. I became part of a team that she put together through the drama studio, the 25th anniversary program of the drama studio, again taking us outside Accra. Working with my colleagues Bill Marshall, Dr. Mohammed Ben Abdallah, and the Kusum crew led by Uncle Kwame Nampa and Sister Amma Bobing. A project that sought to document some essential aspects of the high life tradition, especially telling stories through high life songs. And she selected a number of key high life groups at the time, composers. Again, we followed them to their bases outside Accra. We had to travel to Takwa to document one of the groups there. And I think this insistence on going outside Accra is important. Many of us want to become writers, but we are afraid to go outside Accra. That was something that has stayed with me throughout. And it is maybe because of that, every time I go home, I'll have a recording machine and a camera with me. It's an opportunity to document something important that might be going on while I'm there. From the drama studio programs, we graduated into another very important project, and maybe Auntie C can tell us whether we still have the collection of what? Videos that Kwame Klujeson, live productions, but captured on video. The early days of video in Ghana. Basically, I could count many other ways in which she brought me along to watch what she herself was doing, but with always time to spend on what you may be able to do. And I'm not sure that many of us stopped to think of what that meant for her own work. Instead of doing her own work, the amount of work, time she spent looking at the work done by a younger generation of aspiring creative people in the area of the arts in Ghana. let me say also that it was during this period that she initiated the programs, 2 key programs, and I had the privilege of being an assistant in the early stages. A children's park development project, which resulted, the most famous case is what? The children's park in Accra. But you need to know that we started in Accra, but there was one located, developed in Kumasi also. The last time I was there, or sometime after the park had been created and nice and all that, I went there one day and found that it had been shared out to some developers in quote. The children's park given out to developers. And you can imagine what is on that park today. They've planted some interesting buildings on it for various purposes other than it being available to children. The idea was to have a children's park in every regional capital and then move to the district level. It was in the course of this that she asked me one day to do a poetry, to write a poem, poetic sequence that could be performed as part of commemorations of African independence, Pan-African independence. This challenge made it possible for me to write what I personally believe to be one of my best poems, Children of the Land. I did the draft, she went through it, and with comments, I improved on it, and then she said, now, we are going to recruit children from various schools in Accra. And you are going to work with them to dramatize this poem. We were in the middle of this poem, this project, when I suffered a serious setback. It was in the moment of the revolution. And some really crazy things were happening. My car, BW Golf car, GRS 977, was taken away from me at gunpoint as I was driving from Legon to the Ridge Circle to meet with the children for rehearsal. So I walked the rest of the way. After the rehearsal, I arrived at the office. And he said, why are you walking? Where is your car? And I said, well, the soldiers have taken it away from me. I said, which soldiers? I said, their office is in the PNDC Information Service, Bewakam Road. She closed the meeting, said, get in the car. And 3 big women said, come, let's go and see what's happening with that car. We arrived at the Information Bureau. She walks in, tall, elegant, stops at the door and says, Kofi, which of them? And I said, this one. Corporal Osu. And Corporal Osu was lying on his back on one of the desks. And he circled him three times, stopped, looked down on him. Hey, do you know this young man? Say, of course you won't. Now let me ask you, you asked you lie here like this, what can you do for this country? Are you going to answer me and say, what can you do for this country? I give you up to 4 o'clock. If you don't return the car to him, you wouldn't know where you will sleep tonight. I said, Kofi, let's go. I didn't even get to Legon when I started getting phone calls to come for my car. And I went for the car. I said, why did you bring these women here to come and humiliate us like that? I said, oh, I didn't bring them. You took my car. I was on duty going to work with the children. As it turned out, one of the soldiers from the office actually saw me walking. What they didn't know was that those days you couldn't get taxi. I had walked from Legon to Airport Junction, trying to get a taxi, then Airport Junction to Recycle. And one of the soldiers saw me walking. And on his way back, he saw me working with the children, rehearsing with the children. And he went back to the office, and I understand there was a big quarrel among them. He said, this is disgraceful. We took this young man's car, but he still walked all the way from Legon to come and work with our children. And we are sitting here saying we are, anyway. It has to be somebody like Auntie Efua who could walk to these soldiers holding guns and look down on one of them and ask him, what can you do for this country? Let me end it here for now, because it's a story that must continue to be told and retold.
Thank you very much, Prof. Anyiduhu. I think that I don't know how the rest of you feel, but it's just that we don't have the time. It would be wonderful to just continue listening to this story. But also, I see a chain of people in this room who would have stories to tell. Professor Wellington, when they were talking about the parks and all that, there are people in this room who would be able to fill in, and I guess that as we move into the centenary celebrations next year, we should just have a storytelling session and listen, to what happened with her. Those of us who are close to her were very much aware that a number of people found her extremely foreboding, and so they would have been waiting for her for hours and should have been complaining, but the minute she steps out, they just sort of get silenced and mesmerized, and she used that to a great advantage, as you have heard. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are really wanting to talk about a legacy of Indigenous publishing, not only in Ghana, but across the continent of Africa. And I know Dr. Raikuto doesn't know, but she's going to speak next. I've changed the program around a little bit. We need to find out about, the issues in publishing. She has she has made a career of training people in the area of publishing, and I'm sure that there are many people who will testify to the work that she's done as a scholar. Oh, okay. Before she comes in, Prof. Anido, who wanted to say goodbye. Yes, okay.
I have to apologize. I was scheduled for another program at the Museums and Monuments Board, and I promised to catch up with them before the end. But I must also say just how far Auntie Efua was prepared to go with the young ones. I remember in the middle of my mother's funeral, she didn't tell me that she was coming, but she drove all the way from Accra, and I believe you and Amowi were with her when they got in. And the family was, people still talk about it. When they saw her and knew that I had been working with her, and she could take off from Accra.
Thank you very much. So, at some point we'll see Prof leaving, but we must continue. So, Doc, would you like to use this microphone?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. So, going through the protocols, Madam Chairperson, Prof. Efua Sutherland Adi, our guest speaker who is here to speak, Prof. Amina Mama, Prof. Kofi Anyidoho, authors, publishers, stakeholders in the creative industry, former students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon again. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this historic occasion. 50 years in the life of a publishing house in Ghana is no mean achievement. Today we recognize and celebrate the woman whose vision birthed Afram Publications Ghana Limited, laid the foundation for Indigenous publishing, and led the way for many other women to follow, Efua T. Sutherland. I believe it takes sheer bravery and tenacity to dream such a dream and forge ahead on a path of uncertainty in an industry that was dominated by powerful foreign publishers at the time, like Oxford University Press, Longman, Macmillan, and others who had the clout and the infrastructure to support their businesses in the post-independent Ghana. When I reflect on the history of Afram Publications and Efua Sutherland's legacy, I think about the words of Rachel Platten's fight song, and I quote, "A small boat on the ocean sending big waves into motion." And I believe that that is what Afram and Efua Sutherland and her team accomplished, sending big waves into motion. Women have been at the helm of storytelling, writing, and publishing, and they continue to make impact. Today, publishing is no longer a male-dominated field as it used to be. It is common to see women holding several publishing-related job titles like authors, translators, publishing managers, editors, designers, sales and marketing executives. Out of the 135 publishing businesses or institutions registered with the Ghana Publishers Association, about 25 of them are owned or run by women. This may appear insignificant to some, but this is an improvement on what used to be about 10 years ago. Looking at the historical overview of Indigenous publishing, I would like to note that Indigenous publishing, literature, and all are integral to our cultural, educational, and social development. As I said earlier, the post-independent era in Ghana ushered in new African writers into the literary space with an unspoken mandate to inform and educate the reading public and promote nationalism through education. After independence, the development of indigenous publishing and children's book publishing in particular delayed as foreign publishers continue to play the major roles in the Ghanaian book industry, publishing and distributing books. This phenomenon displeased the intellectuals of the time, as the books were not reflective of our cultural and our social values. This perception provided a strong basis for developing indigenous authorship and publishing, and Efua Sutherland was there to lead the way. Today, about a third of publishers registered with the association publish children's books. As the publishing industry, education, and the public in Africa and Ghana now fully recognize children's literature as a genre and no longer seen as an extension of some adult project. Her legacy, what we are celebrating today, among others, is the Afram Publications. That is 50 years this year. Afram has demonstrated 50 years of publishing excellence. I recall how in the early 80s, there were few credible books on the Ghanaian market used to prepare students for the common entrance examinations. But books from Afram were part of the few credible ones. And I am proud to say that I use Afram's English, mathematics, verbal and quantitative aptitude textbooks to prepare for common entrance. And I moved on, and today I am here teaching other people about publishing. Kudos to Afram, the visionaries, and the team who have held the fort for all these 50 years. Ayiko. Also, since the inception of the book industry program, Now Publishing Studies, a program on which I teach and have taught for quite a while, Afram has supported us by opening its doors to our students for industrial attachment and internship projects, giving them a great opportunity to learn the best industry practice to augment the theory we teach at KNUST. Efua Sutherland, the pioneer of children's authorship and publishing. As an author, poet, playwright, director, Efua Sutherland established, and we have heard about it from other speakers, the Writers' Workshop, the Ghana Drama Studio, Ghana Society of Writers, the Ghana Experimental Theatre, and the community project, Kosidan, the Story House. And even though she's not here with us, her works are still speaking. So that even before the emergence of digital publications as we know them today in Ghana, a Mofra Foundation, a non-profit organization in collaboration with Afram Publications again, and the estate of Efua Sutherland in 1999, locally published the first audiobooks, Tahinta, a reading play for children, and we saw how it was wonderfully performed here. And then Voice in the Forest in 2006. So again, Efua Sutherland is leading the way for indigenous digital publishing. When we think about all these things, we know that indigenous publishing is valuable to societal development. Why is that? Because it creates an avenue for the dissemination of knowledge, the knowledge we produce through research as academics. It gives us the opportunity to tell our stories, share our experiences and our histories, and promote and interpret our culture the way we know it to be, so that we don't have to wait for people to tell us what they think about our culture. We tell them what we believe and what we know. Indigenous publishing has value because it reinforces the important values and traditional concepts that we hold dear and help us to project our cultural identity as a people. Having said that, it's important for us to note that publishing in Africa, in Ghana, has faced several challenges. In a study I conducted in 2017, which I believe is still relevant, identifies some of the challenges of indigenous publishing. And this data was culled from responses from authors, publishers, and some book users. Authors, for example, had a challenge with monitoring sales of the print books that are issued. Because apart from the reports from publishers or booksellers, authors have no other way to monitor the sale of their print books. For their digital publications, they can do that online. Another challenge, and this was from the publishers and some authors, was executing publishing contracts. Even though we have been publishing for many years, in many publishing houses, a gentleman's agreement is still common among publishers, authors, and other publishing services providers. So yes, we'll do it. We shake hands, we drink a cup of coffee, and that is it. But we forget that people forget, human beings die. And so when the people who signed the contract or are supposed to be agreeing on the contract are not available or they forget, there is no document to remind us of our obligations and our expectations. Only a few publishing houses have written agreements with their service providers, and this has a propensity for conflict. Other challenges of indigenous publishing is the low skill and competence levels of staff, access to credit, and the lack of capital for small publishers. Because, as M.N. Rao says, it takes 9 months, just like a baby, to be born, for a good book to come out. And so if you assess credit from a financial institution, it takes 9 months for the book to actually materialize. Then the sales and the distribution happens. And so the payback period will not be conducive to small publishers who are waiting for our reading public in Ghana who are not so enthused about reading other books apart from textbooks. But in the midst of all these things, I believe that publishing is still relevant and has a future in Ghana and in Africa and beyond. How do we go about this as stakeholders in the publishing business? I believe that we need to adapt to the ever-changing needs and roles of readers or users of our content. So today, a publisher cannot wake up one Saturday morning, have a good dream, get somebody to write a book and expect that people would buy it. We need to know what our customers want, how they want it, when they want it, to package it to meet their demands. 2, it's important that publishers balance the business and civil or social responsibilities of publishing so that our social values and our histories can be preserved, because publishing is not just business. Publishing is also a service, apart from it being an academic discipline. So we must marry all these aspects of publishing to continue to be relevant. Upgrade of skills through training and investing in technology is also an important point that stakeholders of the publishing industry must remember. It is not just enough to want to sit in your small corner with the little resources that you have and try to publish a book or create content. We must explore other ways, like collaborative publishing, where 2 or more publishers can come together with their skills, pool resources, and produce good quality publications. And then, as Prof mentioned, input is important. He received a lot of input from Mrs. Sutherland, and today we are here listening to all the interesting stories that we wish we could continue to hear. So collaborative publishing is important. Let's take advantage of that. Mentoring young authors who have stories to tell, and researchers who create and produce new knowledge to showcase Africa and Ghana. Again, we have an example of how Prof was mentored to become a young published author and has taken it on to this point. And we are all here listening and benefiting from these wonderful stories. So publishers and other institutions, I throw this challenge to you. Let's take advantage of this call and mentor young authors. And I remember there was reference to Ministry of Education bringing back creative writing. So we throw the challenge to you too. Little drops of water make a mighty ocean. And we hear many people say we should catch people young, and then we can groom them to become who they are supposed to be. So let's mentor young authors who have stories to tell, young researchers who create content so that new knowledge would abound. And again, because I am from an academic institution, I may be biased towards the academia. I think that we must create a healthy industry and academia partnership. The nexus between industry and academia is research. And industries that have thrived and had a healthy and mutually beneficial relationship have done so because the collaboration between the two has been strong. And I say that if academia is to produce students or graduates to feed industry, then the expectation would be that industry supports academia since they are the main beneficiary of our output. In conclusion, I want to commend the organizers of this program and encourage all of us who are gathered here to continue to invest in and support indigenous publishing. Let us build on the foundation our forebearers have laid. Although not physically present here with us, Efua Sutherland still speaks through her work and is making impact. A hearty congratulations to the From Publication family, to the Sutherland family on this Golden Jubilee. I believe that indigenous publishing and the legacy of Efua Sutherland will thrive. From Publication and other projects that Efua Sutherland initiated will continue to flourish. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. While you were speaking, I could just, recall the stage at which we came to Afram and the real difficulties that there have been in doing indigenous publishing. I'm sure that when we open the floor, maybe people will make a contribution to this, but it's not been easy to do publishing in Ghana at all. We have among us those who are helping us to consume, if you like, the writing, and it's so sad sometimes that children, and in fact, many of us in Ghana feel that you only read for exams and then that's it. Or maybe if you want to go to heaven, then you read some inspirational books. So we need to talk about that and when we get around to it. Yeah, so now we've come to the highlight of our afternoon's program, and that is to hear from a broader perspective issues of indigenous publishing and beyond. Because when we talk about a legacy, we think about the past, but we must always remember that a legacy is also about the future. We have with us this afternoon a very important woman who has most lately, her association with Ghana has been that she was the Kwame Nkrumah chair at the Institute of African Studies. She's a very well-known crusader for African women and feminism across both Africa and the diaspora. And part of her work in the area of feminism has been in making sure that women's voices are heard, and therefore issues of publication have been a very important part of her work, and it includes her, creating the survival of feminist Africa, making sure that this journal that allows women to have their voices heard it lives. It will be interesting to hear how she has done that. She's an academic and has taught in several universities, and at the moment is teaching in Oakland, California. Is it Davis now or Oakland? Davis now, yes. So University of California, Davis. She is the chair of the board of directors of the Global Fund for Women, and has sat on the board of directors of the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. So Professor Amina Mama is both an activist and an academic, and has a wide range of interests, but her focus is always on Africa and the African diaspora and how we can move forward. And so we're very privileged to have her come and share with us how we can look beyond the here and now and see where we can get to in the future. So, Professor Mama, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Sound check? Good. Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction, and let me begin by thanking our veteran who's just leaving for his stories, and support the suggestion that came at the end of his speech. We need more of those stories, and we need them to be recorded, because those are our history. Those are the legacy. And people are getting older, so I wish we could have spent a day hearing stories and putting them down and recording them for posterity and for the next generation. People of my generation very rarely get to hear those stories. If we want to find out things, we have to do a lot of research and reading. And thank you also to Lucy for your wisdom and experience on publishing. I remain very worried about the commercialization of publishing. Having spent some time in the US, I'm watching how big corporate houses are capturing and profiting from academic research that they do not pay for or fund. It's very carnivorous. So this critique of what is happening with global neoliberalism to the publishing industry and the commodification of knowledge, this does not work in our favor. So today has already been a hugely refreshing experience to hear and learn more about indigenous publishing, where people still care about publishing, about knowledge production locally. And this needs to be defended and protected and grown as almost the opposite end of what the big corporate houses are doing. It's treasure. It is our own gold. Let's value it. I have some slides, if the gentleman, David, thank you, is able to put them up. Yeah, there's something there. Not okay, thank you, David. I'll begin with a quote from a young feminist poet that resonated with me. Next slide. No, that's not supposed to be playing. Just the slide, please. Thank you. Her name is Koleka Putuma, and one of her poems in a collection called Collective Amnesia, she wrote these words: "Our tongues are burning in our mouths. When we talk about history, we put the fire out." Now, it's no accident that she's a South African, and I think my own connection with that comes from early displacement as a child. During the civil war in Nigeria, I was sent away to boarding school in an all-white school. And as the only black child, I have to say this is where psychologically I experienced displacement, loss, alienation. And in the ensuing years, the thing that saved me and saved many, many African children all over the world, beyond those who are not in touch with their indigenous roots. So almost I'm coming at it from the opposite end of the spectrum. It was reading. It was discovering and finding that we could live beyond our immediate institutional vicinity and reach back in the past and reach across oceans and find ourselves again in literature written by people like us in African literature. So my entry into reading first and later writing and teaching and publishing, as you kindly mentioned, comes from a deep psychological realization of what loss of indigeneity means. And I dare say this is actually the reality that any place that has ever been colonized must also reckon with. There's a lot of work that has to be done to recover the indigeneity, to unlock and unleash, hence my title, Unleashing Our Creative Potential. It requires mining deep and traveling far. And for many, many, and I would say all the contemporary generation, the imperative to have access to indigenous resources is more urgent than ever, because these things, languages are dying. Without indigenous publishing, we die an existential and cultural death. So our tongues are indeed burning in our mouths. And when we talk, we can put that fire out. But for our tongues to be burning required the realization, and that often came through reading, because it didn't come from the immediate environment, whether it was a colony or a boarding school or any other kind of carceral condition. It can be here in Accra because of the alienation that the modern world inflicts on all our children. So this is where people like Efua Sutherland's legacy becomes so important as a living legacy. Next slide, please. And I'll start by congratulating Essie Sutherland and Anne Adams for this volume, The Legacy of Efua Sutherland. And I'm going to begin with a few words. Clearly, I'm here amongst people who know far more about Efua Sutherland, Efua Theodora Sutherland, than I do. And I thank them, Essie in particular, for inviting me, because it gave me the access to this book and to the opportunity to familiarize myself more deeply than previously. So I begin with, as many of you here know, her importance as a pioneer, as a first African female playwright and director south of the Sahara. I think she was the first. Her training here in Ghana and in Cambridge gave her a global perspective on the importance of indigenous knowledge. So I say the stepping out conscientizes you by force to appreciate more and more. Whereas here, people are often just looking outwards. If you've been out, you will jolly well look back and look inwards because of what you will experience. So her training, it's important that she returned to Ghana in 1957, the year of independence, when she wrote her first short story. And forgive my pronunciation, New Life at Cherefaso. Will that do? Humbly. And then we've heard from other speakers about the establishment of the drama studio, her role as the artistic director of a group. Moving on to her writings, because I think her career is familiar, and now we have this volume to assist us, so I needn't spend too much time on it because she's well known here. Next slide. Her early writings, I think, are very, very important. And here's something that she said, which I trust you can read better than me on the slide. I'm not sure if you can read it. Yes? Hasn't it always been so that humanity has demonstrated its need again and again for the artist and for artistic creation? It is indispensable. So I've already said this is what keeps many of us alive in a troubled world. She knew this only too well. Next slides. She made her writings, I won't list, but these are the ones I have looked at in preparing for today and been re-inspired again and again. The next one, her first play, her early book, 1962. As someone who's interested in the archives, I think the timing of this is really, really important to note. Note the dates and think what was happening in Ghana at that time. This is early independence, and she writes something that is an indictment of materialism, the spawn of insatiable self-interest. Now, we're still living with this. This is pertinent today. She noted it in 1962. Next. And this one I just love, The Marriage of Us, Anand Sewa, probably her most famous production, produced in 1971. It's incredible, the insightfulness and the creativity and the way in which she blends genres. If you haven't read it, Google, you'll find it online, as I did. If you don't have a copy, the PDF is there. Reread it, re-perform it. These things are alive and well. And in that play, you have all the issues of marriage, even today. It's very, very pertinent. So, but I want to say that she was more than all these things you've heard already, more than a playwright, more than a folklorist or children's author. She was also, and this particularly interests academics probably, but she thought hard about her practice. She was a cultural theorist as well as a producer and an activist. So for her it was praxis. She applied her ideas in her creative experimentation. So creative writing and directing and performing and working with children was the implementation of an incredible philosophical vision. Men get credited with the philosophical vision. We know Nkrumah had a great philosophical vision. Well, I put it to you that Efua Sutherland had at least as great a philosophical vision as any of the male thinkers you will claim. It's just that she implemented it in her work and her writing in a humble way, working with children instead of seeking political office. This is real, this is tangible, and it makes her legacy even more valuable. So I want to mention that because that is not so much on record, and I think the new volume begins to get there, but there is so much more in terms of how we appreciate her theories, her experiments, and her studies, as well as just the outputs, because they give you the context. Next slide, moving on, and the next one. Thank you. So here we are. One of the things that she did, and has already been mentioned, but I want to underline, she didn't just do her own work. In fact, I wondered how she found time to do her own creative work. We've heard how much she gave to mentoring others, and anyone who's a teacher or a serious educator knows that that will take as much of your time as you let it, and it could consume you completely. She still managed to produce. But what I want to lift up here today is that she understood that no individual can do these things, so she also put a huge amount of energy and time into building institutions. Building institutions, organs that could foster cultural production in Ghana. So she engaged in endless, very tiring labor building institutions. There's a long list of them. It ends with Afram Publishing. And I needn't do the list because we've heard several of them today. So in the interest of time, I won't. But I do want to mention Panafest. She was the mother of Panafest, a legacy that has just been completed, that her daughter has done huge, huge service in maintaining and sustaining as a Pan-African historical theatre festival. And this continues after how many years? 31 years, to be a framework for bringing Africans on the continent and the diaspora together. around long repressed issues raised since the days of slavery and colonialism. As we sit in the 21st century, the importance of this cannot be understated. If we did not have these festivals, where would the cultural producers be gathering? We would remain vulnerable to the claws of the carnivorous that I mentioned at the beginning. And not only are they carnivorous, they pervert, they misshape, they jettison many, many things of value. So it isn't just the problem of being eaten alive, it's the problem of how our creativity is digested and what is left after that process of globalization. And I'm talking about corporate globalization. So more than ever, we must hold what is ours and make it precious. So Afram Publications, since 1973, happy birthday, happy 50th. It's half a century. Let's clap. This is, yeah, I feel extremely happy to know and learn about it. 50 years is no mean feat. Many of us know the conditions, and we heard from my sister Lucy here about how arduous it is. So for an Indigenous publishing house to have survived 50 years, to still be producing the quality of books that it is producing is truly remarkable. Not only that, it is an enormous act of cultural resistance. We ran a whole festival talking about the cultural economy, and this publishing house wasn't represented there. We're ashamed, because this is cultural resistance, and it is linked to the economy. How they've managed to continue to resource, that's the challenge for many, to produce school books, children's books, and the fact that they chose that futuristic commitment to the next generation all deserves to be truly appreciated. Clap again, let's, and commended. So, Efua Sutherland, I think we can go to the next slide, was a researcher, theorist extraordinaire, and manifest all this, as I said, in the creative applications of her theories. Even more evident in her unpublished presentations and essays is this role. Yet her theories still tend to be ignored, and this is something we must change moving forward. Critics write and theorize about her creative work without taking note that she herself theorized and wrote about her creative process. So we need to lift that, her as a theorist as well as a producer, because this explains how she wrote what she wrote. So her legacy of Pan-African cultural activism abides, as you can see in the quote. It abides, and this is from the book that I mentioned at the beginning, the legacy book. And it abides in debates on the form and content of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. It is reflected in the colloquia and performances of Panafest, the Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival, and numerous other objects of Ghanaian cultural heritage are stamped by her legacy. So the volume attempts to begin to really, it's substantial. It's, I forget how many pages, about 1,000 and something. Not quite. It's close. It's a big, thick volume. I only have the PDF, so forgive me on the page numbers. But it's substantial. So further congratulations on that. But I'm going to move from her legacy to share a little more broadly, if I have time. I wanted to respect who she was and her legacy first, but to situate that in the broader context of Pan-African and feminist writing and publishing. And some of her peers include, we can go to my slides now, I would say Amy, this is slightly before her, people like Amy Ashwood Garvey is another Pan-African feminist writer, speaker, and activist, and was involved in organizing the Manchester Pan-African Congress in 1945. So we're talking other mid-20th century great thinkers who shared the commitment to women, to united Africa, and indeed some of them started out in the diaspora. This was Garvey's first wife and inspiration. And she found her family in Ghana and traced her route here, but I won't dwell on her story. Next. She's definitely a contemporary. And then a little earlier than Efua Sutherland herself, we have the famous Victorian feminist Adelaide Casely Hayford, who was more of a speaker than a writer, but shared the commitment to educating the youth and actually founded a chapter of the Universal Negro Improvement Association here in Africa, and set up a vocational school for young women. So Casely Hayford spent some years in Ghana, married and played a major role. So there are books and books about these contemporaries, and continue, because this is part of the slightly wider context in which Efua Sutherland's legacy can be situated. Next. And here we have one of our own from Ghana. I should say one of your own, but I've Ghanaianed myself just now. Mabel Dove, selected writings done by a colleague at the University of Ghana, put this together for her master's thesis. But she uncovers and therefore puts together this pioneering African feminist, Mabel Dove, journalist and writer, who had many names and actually fought court cases because her work was stolen by an English guy who claimed it for himself. Mabel Dove, like Efua Sutherland, was famous for wearing the cloth and rejecting the frock, and did us proud. She went into a political career. And then moving beyond Ghana, we're now moving into the realm of, next slide, people I've read who were formative, and they come from the same era. Here's Lorraine Hansberry. If you have not had chance to see the documentary film on this young, radical, feminist, Pan-Africanist writer, who sadly died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 35, you need to look for the film. It is a understand that Queen Victoria thought she was less than an animal, or an animal. She wrote, "My dear sister Queen, some of your troops are misbehaving. If you like, I can use my forces to discipline them." Did the Queen bother to reply? I don't think so. That is not clear to me. But she did send her this medallion that she proudly wore, not realizing just how bad things were going to get. Next. And here we have the Egyptian Feminist Union. I'm interested in feminist publishing because it's particularly powerfully motivated by the conditions of erasure and absence. So Huda Sharawi of Egypt up in North Africa, they launched the Egyptian Feminist Union. She formed it when she seceded from the male Waft party because they refused to allow women. Women were veiled and secluded in Egypt at that time. L'Egyptienne is a feminist journal that was published from 1925 to 1940. Very nationalistic, very patriotic. Next slide. One of her mentees is Doria Shafik, the Egyptian feminist poet, who actually formed an armed battalion of women to support the Egyptian army in the war. They were never called in, but she was a remarkable poet and publisher. Tragically, she killed herself in 1975. Next, please. I think the suicide is mentionable because of the stress that these women, the struggle that they engaged in societies that were not accepting. So they're all resistors, fighters in their own way. Here's an orature person, just to broaden the oeuvre. That she didn't write, I don't think she read either, but she was Nyerere's main mobilizer. She was actually a singer. So oral history matters too. Bibi Titi Mohammed, she was forgotten, actually at one time jailed and cast aside until the Tanzanian feminist movement decided to make a hero of her and bring up her past, bring up her history, put her on the front cover of their magazine, Sauti ya City, which has been published since the 1980s in English and Kiswahili. Next. And now we're moving closer to the present. Another great favorite, we all know Margaret Busby. There's a picture of Margaret in the 1960s, as you see, sporting the afro of the times. But you all know Margaret Busby, presumably, very well. The founder of Allison and Busby. Next slide. And this is the first thing she saw published, and this is what took her into publishing. Sam Greenlee was a black man who was employed by the CIA, and he was recruited and given a job which was absolutely redundant and useless, and he saw that he was being used so they could say they had black men in the CIA while being given no power, no real authority. So he learned everything he could from the CIA, and then he left and became an urban guerrilla in the Black Power movement. And then he wrote his memoir, The Spook Who Sat, spy for the CIA, spook who sat by the door. Nobody would publish it. Margaret Busby was incensed by this, and this is from a Guardian interview that she did. And so incensed by it that she went about making sure it got published. So it did. Subsequently, it's been made into a film, which you can probably find online. It's worth watching. Next, please. So there's an old picture of Busby with Clive Allison from 1967. So again, we're talking contemporaries now. If Afram was founded in 1973, Allison and Busby, over there in Britain, set up a publishing house, not a black one's or a woman's, but the list of what they published made available to us many of all the things we read first. Next. There she is now, and the thing that she's best known for now, which she's holding in her hand, is the second volume of Daughters of Africa. Next slide. These two volumes are of equivalent importance to the Women Writing Africa, the 4 volumes I showed earlier. But she did Daughters of Africa in 1991, and then more recently, entirely new content, because there is so much out there to be discovered and shared, New Daughters of Africa, which is very recent, and I'm sorry I didn't have my copy to bring and show, because I'm away from my desk, as I said. But here's another feminist publisher, Virago Press, and I want to say that those sad-looking spines are iconic, those green, tatty. These are well-read, well-shared, well-circulated books. In the women's movement, we used to read them and share them, so you had reading groups. And in that, we were discovering what it meant to be black and African in the wider world. By reading about other women, often African Americans, black Brits. The Sadian Women's actually by Angela Carter. She wrote about a fiction, The Black Venus. Anyway, I won't go into detail, but the richness of that archive that women publishers set up to reveal and to make available is indisputable. Next. The women's press, actually, Ros de Lannerol is the name who comes to mind, but the first to make these, Alice Walker, Ellen Kuzwayo, and many, many others, available to a global audience, starting in Britain, 1977. So again, while Efua Sutherland was doing what she was doing here, these parallel things were happening all around the world, in the USA diaspora, in the European diaspora. The birth of the black women's movement, I want to say, is a legacy of that generation and of women like Efua Sutherland. Next. Oh, that's another little, small, short-lived, didn't last as long as the Women's Press or Virago. Both the Women's Press is no longer. Sheba lasted for about 6 years, and it was a much more radical feminist publisher formed by a collective of black women who all had successful careers in their own right, including Pratibha Palmer, the filmmaker. But again, they did the same thing. They made available books that would not be available. Okay, moving on. Here's one more recently, a friend, Bibi Bakare Yusuf, valiantly pioneering publishing, specializing in children's books, specializing in African language publications from across the continent. So I want to shout out for Cassava Republic and read what she said at the Kwame Nkrumah Festival in 1921, which, by the way, is all archived online. You just click that link and you'll find it, or Google it. She says, and this was in the discussion on anti-colonial publishing today, just setting up a publishing house is a political act, an ideological act in the context where publishing tends to be owned by veteran Western publishing machinery, the carnivores I mentioned. And they publish, what they publish about Africa is mediated through the West. I felt it was important that we own the means of production. That is so true. We have to own our own publishing if we want to reflect ourselves and serve our own agendas. Next. So, apart from the publishing houses, I just want to mention, as I'm closing, that every single women's movement or women's organization of substance has also engaged in publishing. Why? Because to grow people and to change consciousness, communication is the tool. There wouldn't be nations if there hadn't ever been the printed word, according to theorist Benedict Anderson. But the point is, once you can put to print, you can share consciousness beyond the room that you're in. And now that we have digital technology, well, that's why we do Feminist Africa, which is at the bottom there. But all these movement organizations have newsletters, which they circulate locally in multiple languages. And I've listed just a few that I've personally know about. Sauti ya City from the Tanzania Media Women's Association since 1980 or so. Speak Out, also known as Turai Kulumani, that's in Zimbabwe. It only just stopped publication due to lack of funds. After 30 years, this newsletter has been a popularly disseminated weapon of the women's movement, raising awareness all over Zimbabwe, distributed to rural communities. And they pay a very small subscription. The Zimbabwe Women's Resource Network bulletin called Woman Plus. It's now defunct, but for a while was the major women's platform across Zimbabwe and some of Southern Africa. African Women, Akinamamawa Africa, the women's group started in London with Wanjiru Kihoro, myself and some others, published a journal. Speaking for ourselves was one of the issues, but it was called African Women. And we had all these debates about, do we take adverts to make it commercially viable or not, in which case we have to raise money, etc. But I learned a lot about what it meant to produce their agendas, a South African feminist journal since the 1990s, now trying to do more Pan-African stuff. No longer surviving, Southern African Feminist Review, which lasted from about 98 to 2000, Patricia McFadden's brainchild, and very powerful, dealing with very intense political issues from a feminist perspective, given the time. This was the height of the constitutional crisis in Zimbabwe. And then Feminist Africa, which I think is the first Pan-African digital publication, which we started in 2002. And we moved it to the University of Ghana's Institute of African Studies to take it away from South Africa, because it should have 10 years in each region. So it's currently rooted here, and we hope it remains Pan-African, because the risk of locating it in one place is it becomes localized because of that struggle between cosmopolitanism and indigenous knowledge, which it tries to straddle. It also tries to straddle the link between theory and practice. So that's, I would say, my experimentation, informed by my theorizing as a Pan-African feminist. This journal had to exist, and for the first time it enabled women writing prose mostly in Africa to talk and communicate across the continent. And that has had a radical, I think, effect in terms of how women are organizing across borders around the African continent, because in 2006 we had the launch of the Pan-African African Feminist Forum. So I want to say movements and knowledge move in synchrony, in synergy, and Feminist Africa is designed around that principle of no thought without action, or action without thought is blind, thought without action is empty, Nkrumah. So it's based on those principles. That's the very first issue, handmade. And as I said, it's now, I think, issue number 20-something. I've just stepped down as editor, so I'm trying to say less about it, actually. But I'm available because I edited it for over 20 years, and the archive is here. All right, so thank you very much for your attention. I wanted to end with those, the latest, the digital technology, open access online. So it has hundreds of thousands of readers, and we never advertised it. We never promote it. There's no need. It finds its readership, and then we encourage its readership to be its writers. So there's a circulation going on between the consumers, those who use it in teaching, and those who write and those who edit, and a very big investment in mentoring. If I say as an editor, you didn't edit a piece once. For the feature articles, you had maybe 6 iterations. So the editing was intensive, and I always say that's why I haven't written anything substantial for 20 years. So I'm hoping to move from editing and publishing to writing in the next few years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that this has been a real learning experience for many of us. We didn't start on time, and therefore, you know, there's a bit of a time crunch here. But a part of the program is to allow those of us who have been listening so attentively to either make comments or ask questions. So we'll take about 10 minutes to do this. We have, there are people here that I'm going to oppress. We have Mrs. Florence Last. Mrs. Florence Last is the founder of St. Martin de Porres School. She's 90, you're 91 or 90 years old. Does she look, no, not at all. But she was a mentee of Efua Sutherland, and so, I mean, I want to acknowledge her. And Auntie Florence, you don't have to speak unless you really want to, but you can hear me urging you in that direction. But yes, the floor is open. Comments, questions, reflections into the future. What do we do with respect to indigenous publishing, given the situation that we find ourselves in? So, yes, anybody want to? Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Okay, Auntie Florence. Yes, okay.
Okay, I thought you had. She wants to speak. Okay.
Well, I have something to say about Auntie Efua Sutherland. She has been almost like my mom since when I was in primary school. From St. Monica's School Primary at Cape Coast through when I was at the training college. And through her, I had the urge to go ahead and do what I wanted to do. At a stage, I felt that I needed someone to give me the courage to go on in my life. And here again, at that time, I had even married. And then she came back from UK after a while when she had left. She came, and at that time, then I married. And even at this time, she continued to mentor me. I was going to her for advice and direction, and she readily did that. So throughout my life, I considered her as my mom, that she took me closely to herself. Even at the death of my husband, she was there with me. She sat with me at the house. There were 2 days, the first week during the death of my husband, she spent 2 nights with me. This continued until I started the school, St. Martin de Porres School, and she was giving me the necessary guidance to help me establish the school. Even to the extent that the school was used as a workshop for the students who were her students at the Ghana University, Legon. They were using the school as their workshop for drama. And the children of the school were being taught to be creative, and even at times, on 2 occasions also, we had to use that as something like the children were kept there camping. The children were camped there for 2 days. And we had parents, some few parents, coming there also to bound together, to work together with the teachers there, for her to establish that it takes home and school to nurture and the children. And so it became something like that place became a center for the community there, the Dansuman community. That means it wasn't being used only by St. Martin de Porres School, but all other children from the community, from other schools. So she actually impacted my life and made me what I am today, gave me the courage to come out and do something worthwhile for the community.
And up to today, I feel strongly that without her, I wouldn't have been what I am. And I'm very, very grateful. Yeah. She had wanted me to write. And in fact, I started, but it was too much for me then. It was during the time, because the school is 50 years this year, around the time that Afram Publishers also started. And she had wanted me to write, but I couldn't do that together with the school then. At that time I had started. But then that didn't even end there. We were going to some villages near Accra, or Eastern region, to help with school dropouts, encourage them to come back to the classroom. And there also she asked me to start writing for the beginners. So I did about 3 grades, grade 1, 2, 3, for beginners. So twice in a month we go to the village, gather the children there, and try to win them back to classroom. So in a nutshell, this is something that is still in me, regardless that I'm 90 years plus, but I still feel that I still have something to give to my community. Although the school is there, but I still feel that I can still give something out. All this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met this wonderful woman, Auntie Efua Sutherland. So I'm very, very grateful to you.
Thank you. My name is Ike Apia, a retired lecturer from KNUST, Department of Publishing Studies. My first encounter with Auntie Efua was when, in 1985, I happened to be the first among the first batch of the book industry program, which is now Publishing Studies. As a student intern in 1985 at Afram Publications, when it was then located at the old place near police headquarters, I was barely 3 days into the office when a woman walks in and queries the production manager, who later became the managing director, Eric Ofe. Eric, Ian Swufi. That was Auntie Efua wanting to know who these guys walking about the corridors of Afram Publications were, and I was so scared. But it gingered me to be bolder. Anyway, just before the beginning of this whole symposium, I told Auntie Lucy that I wanted to agitate the minds of the two profs about my experience in class over the years concerning indigenous publishing. I do roll calls, and when I mention a name, I'm able to locate where you come from. The question I ask is, you come from the Volta region. do you speak Ewe? And they go like, no. What language do you speak in the house? English. I meet a Ga. Do you speak Ga? A little. What language do you speak in the house? English. I meet my own from the Akan family. Do you understand Twi? Yeah, I do. Can you read Twi? No. And I'm concerned. So I was telling the two profs that when they speak, even the dead hear. So that you should do something about it. So I'm happy Auntie 90 plus was saying that she, even at her age, she still has something to offer the community. Please, Auntie AC, Prof. Anidoho and Madam Mahama, or Mama Way, I know when you speak, the dead can hear. Let's do something before we lose our cultural identity, which is our language. If you give me the Twi book, when we entered, there was this beautiful reading going about we were listening to. And I said, this reading is beautiful, but I wish we could read just as beautifully in our own local languages. If you give me the Twi book right now, I'll read it to your amazement. But others don't. And we are facing out. What are we doing to our language? So please, that is my concern about indigenous publishing. Thank you.
All right, one more contribution. Otherwise, we call in. Oh, sorry. Yeah, oh, yes, please. Who? In front here. Who is it? Who is it you? Oh, madam. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from GES, Justina Jaba, Director for Administration. When Prof. Anidoho was speaking and all the others, all eyes were on me when it gets to the point of education, education, education. First, we want to thank you so much for the invitation, and we appreciate it so much. That is from the Director General, Dr. Eric Nkansa. And we wish to say that, yeah, we have appreciated all the work that has been said here and the writings, creative writing in our schools again. I'll communicate it to them and also to leadership. And also, as was rightly said, reading in our schools and in our homes. I believe all those who love reading started from the home. And it's important that as parents, as grandparents, we all help at least buying one storybook into the house for every child every year. So that when we are buying the textbooks, as was said, this time, at least if we have 3 children in the house, we know everybody is going to get one storybook. So if by the end of the year we have 3 books, each of the 3 of them could have read through all the books, and they will be building their capacity in reading and also instilling in their minds creative writing. So thank you so much, and we've learned a lot from this place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, Nana, you want to say something? Okay. Amen.
Dr. Nkansa, that the solution and then the conversation to be carried on to get results, we need to sit. The National Commission on Culture and Ghana Education Service, it is our duty that we sit as soon as possible to begin the conversation so that what my big brother mentioned concerning language. I went to a house at La. The guy wanted to, the little boy was climbing and it was dangerous. Said a man telling this guy that in Ga and all that. He said, Kwe, drop down. Opese also can brofo on a ba can brofo. Therefore, if you are not articulate with the English language, you are less intelligent. And so forth, our language. So, Admin Director, GES, National Commission on Culture, the marriage should begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. MC, I think that we can start winding down and yeah.
Yes, madam. At this point, I would just want to inform you that we have some of Efua Sutherland's book on display for sale. We have two of her titles, Voice in the Forest and then Tehinta, all the two going for 100 Ghana cedis. We also have audio versions on CDs going for 10 cedis, so you can grab a copy before you leave. We will take the vote of thanks, and at this point, I will invite Ms. Harriet Tego, the MD of Afram Publications, to do us the honors. Can we put our hands together for her?
Just to add to the MC's comments on the books, these are limited editions. They were made specifically for today. So if you don't get your copy, voila. Maya Angelou, a sister friend of Efua Sutherland, once said, "Be present in all things and thankful for all things." Good evening, once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Harriet Adelaide Tego, the MD and publisher of Afram Publications, the first female MD and publisher. On behalf of our shareholders, the board, management and staff of APL, Afram Publications Limited for short, it's now my privilege of proposing the vote of thanks to all those who in various ways helped in organizing this symposium successfully. I will start by thanking the GPA, our host, in including this August program as part of the 20th Ghana International Book Fair and the immense support they've given us. To our board chair and chair of this occasion, in spite of all the challenges of planning and execution of this symposium, she allowed and encouraged our team and ideas to enable us see this day. We call her Ma. We are very grateful. Without her support, we wouldn't be here today. Madam Amowi Sutherland Phillips, thank you very much for the Zoom and late night calls. Your advice and directions immensely assisted us. Madam, I owe you one. Professor Amina Mama, our guest speaker, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here in person. Thank you for a very well-researched speech or paper, even though we did not give you all the information you needed. You have done us really proud, and we are very grateful. Professor Nido, who has left, but we've benefited from his storytelling, and we are also grateful to him. To Dr. Lucy Raiketo of the Department of Publishing Studies, our alma mater. We'll be very proud of us today, and you especially. Thank you so much for the industry information shared with us all. To our in-person and online participants, we say a big thank you for being a part of our celebration. We also hope the discussions and contributions to the publishing industry will continue long after this evening, hopefully for the next 50 years. To Team APL, where are they? Kwabna, I don't know what to say. It's been challenging, but we've managed to be here today. And to all the others, thanks for the support. To the media, we hope the information shared here will see light of day, both online and in print. Our technical team, but for a few hitches here and there, I think you've done a good job. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate you. Hey, I forgot, sorry, the School of Performing Arts, they left, so, but Ma, please send our gratitude to them. Auntie Akos, please give me a wave. They were the trailblazers for us to follow. Without them, some of us wouldn't be here. We are thankful. And to all of us, let's keep the publishing fire burning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. As we are leaving, we have some packages for each and every one here. You kindly take yours before you move out. It's been and the books, yes, as Madam said, these are limited, there are limited copies. It's only going for 100 Ghana cedis for the two. And then we have 10 cedis for each of the CDs. So make sure you grab your copy as well. Yes, it's been a wonderful event, very insightful, and I think we have all enjoyed it. Can we put our hands together for ourselves? Yes. My name is Joseph Jemfi, and it was a pleasure hosting you. God bless us all. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.